On March 5th, 2007, a car bomb was exploded on Mutanabbi Street in Baghdad. Mutanabbi Street is a mixed Shia-Sunni area. More than 30 people were killed and more than 100 were wounded. This locale is the historic center of Baghdad bookselling, a winding street filled with bookstores and outdoor bookstalls, named after the famous 10th century classical Arab poet al-Mutanabbi. This is an old and established street for bookselling and has been for hundreds of years. Mutanabbi Street also holds cafes, stationery shops, and even tea and tobacco shops. It has been the heart and soul of the Baghdad literary and intellectual community. This tragedy is part of a wider and continuing tragedy, but one that we want to isolate and address, not only for the loss of lives, but also for the implications underlying the destruction of a street where books were sold. Bookselling on Mutanabbi Street is no different from bookselling here. We traffic in memory, ideas, and dreams. In that sense, we feel that Mutanabbi Street starts at the front door of all of our bookshops. Mutanabbi Street starts here. Our first reader will be Sinan Antoon.
When I was torn by war, I took a brush immersed in death and drew a window on war's wall. I opened it, searching for something, but all I saw was another war and a mother weaving a shroud for the dead man still in her womb. And one last one entitled A Photograph. The photograph was of an Iraqi boy on the front page of the New York Times. He sat at the edge of the truck, 8 or 9 years old, surrounded by his family, his father, mother, and 5 siblings were asleep. His head was buried in his hands. All the clouds of the world were waiting on the threshold of his eyes. The tall man wiped off the sweat and started digging the 7th grave. The next reader is going to be Diane di Prima. Thank you.
I'm going to read a few things that I wrote sitting in a hotel room in whatever year that was, 01, I guess, when we started bombing Afghanistan. These are short poems on the Afghan war. 1, small bones of mountain children in the snow. 2, bags of rice burst open, burlap flaps in the wind. Even the label, USA, is fading. 3, we airdrop transistor radios. Can you eat them? Will they keep you warm? This one called Les Américains, written October 5th, 2001. We are feral, rare as mountain wolves. Our hearts are pure and stupid. We go down, pitted against our own. Then one other short thing. We gathered there frequently. Old scholars, printers, book collectors, old and young writers passed through the place on any given afternoon. All kinds of activity came through the shop in the years I worked there. They were the early years of the Black uprising, Black awareness. Robert Williams was active in South Carolina. There was a period of time when the cot in the back of the store was a drop-off for various disassembled armaments. Sometimes someone we didn't know would come in and put something, a bunch of miscellaneous hardware, under the mattress, making the cot unusable for several days. In the day or two, someone else would come by and take the hardware away in a shopping bag. and that would be that for a week or so. There was one wonderful black photographer who would often come in with an empty shopping bag. From what I understood, he would leave the store in a zigzag path and eventually get on a train going south. Thank you.
I wanted to read a poem that was sent by the poet that I invited to the recent San Francisco International Poetry Festival from Iraq. I've been in touch with Saba Jassim for more than a year and a half. After the United States would not give him his visa, I asked him to, I told him about Mutanabbi Street, and he wrote a poem, and he wrote it in English, though he writes in of course, in Arabic. But this one he wrote in English, so I'll read it. One figure in the poem you should know, Humbaba, which is a figure, an ogre, a monster of immemorial age. That was a special big garden, a forest where all types of trees and flowers grew, the trees bending down gently, flinging branches. Our orchard grew like a crown on the sun's eyebrow. Where did Humbaba come from? His mother was just a cave, his father unknown. Who made him a friend, pretending guardian of the orchard? Did those nice shrubs need fear to go begging for a guardian and have Humbaba and his treacherous ilk? Those plants and flowers were like books everyone could read, not cut and throw away. Their different fantastic colors had formed our blood so that our veins ran smoothly. Our 7 wonders showed. Then Humbaba made a whirlwind of fire and snow. Who crowned him king? Who showed him our garden was but a jail? Humbaba was great and scary, but not so very strong, though no one could ever conquer him, as no one would ever try. Time and again, when things grew old, Humbaba alone believed himself eternal and young, still powerful, able to defeat all. Humbaba didn't want to know one fact, that accumulation will lead to eruptive change. But sadly, when suddenly he realized it after all, he chose to check its power on all, the hard, the tall. The ogre cut all the willows and left them wailing behind. He crushed all the shrubs and plants, leaving them creeping and broken all over. He damaged the flowers and colors. The flowers withered, their leaves all burned, and soon they were throwing their seeds every which way. And when the whole orchard changed into a dry, gray waste, Humbaba, his mind like stone, shouted his horrible cry of fire and burned all that gray and yellow. Birds of all kinds were flying away with ashes in their beaks, which Humbaba couldn't oversee anymore or ever set on fire. Then grandfather ended his day and continued closing his big, thick yellow book, turning to his grandsons and daughters and handing them a big red bud, then bidding them good night and laying his head on his yawning book, he glances solemnly at the full moon in the core of the sky, his eyelids blinking once, searching for that big silvery rose.